he's entitled to an initial appearance, and we're responsible for his safety. So the SWAT team accompanied him to Tinker to make sure he got there safe. The big cases that pop out are Waco, the Oklahoma City bombing, the Olympics, 9/11, an undercover case.
The FBI today released a more detailed sketch of the Oklahoma City bombing suspect known as John Doe Two. It now shows the suspect wearing a baseball cap. In Oklahoma City, the death toll rose to 87. Rescuers hope to finish their search of the rubble by the end of the week.
Few things were normal about it. Because of the magnitude, it's still the largest case of domestic terrorism in the country today.
All right, we're joined today by Barry Black, who is the author of the book Hazardous Devices, memoir of an FBI bomb technician, accountant, and sniper. And one of these three, generally, I find to be evil. Can you guess which it is, Barry?
I'm going to say the accountant part.
Yes. Bean counters and lawyers can be a very frustrating part of the world.
Yeah, that was a good guess on my part. Yeah, I get that a lot, actually.
But that is pretty common. A lot of people think of FBI agents. I think they recruit very heavily from lawyers, but accountants are pretty popular too. I'm guessing because of a lot of white collar crime, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. When I got in 1988, that was the height of the oil bust and the bank failures that were happening all across America. So there was a big emphasis placed on hiring accountants. Actually, I was in engineering my first year in college and was talking to the recruiter, and she just told me, "Hey, we're not hiring engineers. We're hiring accountants and lawyers." So I changed majors specifically to get in the bureau, and it worked out well for me.
Interesting. So you had no other law enforcement. You went straight from college into the bureau.
Oh, none at all. I wanted to be an FBI agent since I was 10, and this was sort of my focus. Was my little league baseball coach was an agent. He was a great role model. He answered all my questions, pestered him up from middle school, high school, and finally in college, he goes, "You need to talk to the recruiter."
And where was this?
This was in Birmingham, Alabama.
Alabama. Okay. Alabama. All right. And I think you nicknamed it Birmingham, Alabama or something?
So in the 60s, as a boy, Eric, I remember seeing the Ku Klux Klan on the street corners, taking up money like firefighters do nowadays. And after the 16th Street church bombing, that the Klan was doing a lot of bombings down there, and it was just had become nationally known as Birmingham. You know, it was a horrible moniker.
It was the oldest Black church in Birmingham, and it was fairly large. And so it made sense that meetings would happen there, which would also make it a target.
Okay. I remember there was a movie called Crazy in Alabama with Melanie Griffith. I don't know if it's something you've seen, but they kind of touched on that a little bit.
Well, if you think Mississippi Burning as another movie, it was more like that, you know, in the 60s. Yeah, it was something that you just lived with growing up in the South, and none of that sat right with me, and I think had something to do with my desire to go ahead and get in the bureau.
In your time in the bureau, I believe you described you had a front row seat to Waco, Oklahoma City, and the rise of domestic terrorism. Is that a fair statement?
Fair domestic and international terrorism up through 9/11, sure.
Okay, and you just joined in '88, so you kind of slipped in right, as that started heating up. I mean, I believe '83 I covered. There was the incidents in Arkansas. I've also had, Danny Coulson on. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Danny?
Sure, I know Danny.
Okay, did you work for him at one time? Because I know you were a sniper.
So Danny was what we call a plank holder, one of the founders of the hostage rescue team. They're centered at Quantico, and that's all they do is that type of tactical work. When I got on the what we call a regional SWAT team, um, back then there were 56 divisions in the FBI. Uh, think of the 50 states, and a couple of them are so big they have a couple of divisions, but each division would have its own SWAT team. So I got on the SWAT team here in Oklahoma City, and then we would do some training with HRT, but most of it was within our region.
Okay, so you were in Oklahoma City. At what point were you assigned to Oklahoma City?
In 1988, when I finished the academy, they gave us a sealed envelope with our orders. We had no idea where we could go, anywhere in the country. and I tore my envelope open, and it said Oklahoma City. I had no indication. We thought most of the accountants in my class thought we would end up in either Texas or Oklahoma because it's oil country, and that oil bust was what was causing all the bank failures. But yeah, my first assignment was here in Oklahoma City, and I was fortunate to stay for the entire 31-year career.
Very interesting. Now, there was a federal presence in the Murrah Building. Did that include you?
The FBI office was never in the federal building, in the Murrah Federal Building. We had a separate office that was several miles away. The Federal Credit Union was there. So you'll remember back when you got a paper paycheck,
Oh, yeah.
every other Thursday, I would go to the credit union and deposit that check. And sadly, a lot of the tellers and some of the young ladies there I knew were killed in the bombing.
Okay, and I know ATF was also in the building. Did you work with them directly, like Luke Franey and some of the others, or no?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I knew Luke. Of course, there was a military recruiting stations. The Social Security office was there. I mentioned the credit union. It was the federal building where most federal agencies were housed. There were agents my wife and I knew that didn't survive. My wife, I mentioned, she was a federal employee as well. Uh, in Oklahoma City, there was the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, and then behind it to the south was what they called the old post office building. It's where Machine Gun Kelly was tried back in the gangster days. That was also full of government employees. There was a little underground tunnel that connected the two, and all the federal cars were parked in the Murrah Building garage, along with my wife's personal car. So she drove to work that morning, just like every other morning. And um, I didn't know it for a while, but at 9 o'clock, she left, which was 2 minutes before the building was destroyed.
Why did she leave? What happened?
She and two other officers had interviews with their clients, convicted individuals that they had responsibility for. So, just as part of their morning routine, they had scheduled appointments with different convicted individuals that were on their caseload. And it's grace of God, she left when she did.
So where were they being interviewed? Were they over in the jail? Or I'm trying to
No,
paint a picture of the whole area for everyone.
sure. So when you get convicted, you do your time, whatever the sentence is, and then you're on probation. Well, a lot of times probation will be supervised. Well, the people that supervise you are federal probation officers. So those federal probation officers will go out, interview you at your job, make sure you're actually living where you're reportedly living. So they're in the field a good bit, and that's why they have government vehicles to go do those kinds of visits.
Okay, so that's pretty common. I guess you'd go in the office at 8 and be out of the office by 9 o'clock in the field type of situation.
Every day is different. They may be in court. They advise the judges on sentencing guidelines and such as that. So it's not a job where you're sitting at your desk. And thankfully, as I said, she left right at 9 o'clock. She drove in front of the bomb, heading eastbound to get to the highway when it detonated, and the overpressure actually moved her car. She thought she had driven into a construction hole or something.
Did she see anyone or anything?
No, I've asked her. She remembered seeing two older ladies, and the reason she remembered them, their shirts, their tops were similar in color, and she said they were walking in the building, and she described the car they had gotten out of. Well, I was there shortly after the blast, and when we were talking, that a car of that color was very close to the edge of the crater. So she's probably the last person to see those ladies alive.
Okay, now just to kind of, as I mentioned, paint a picture because you mentioned, there's FBI, there's a lot going on. It seems like in Oklahoma City at the time. What was up? I mean, why was there such a massive federal presence there, versus somewhere else? Can you describe how things were in Oklahoma City and why there was this kind of odd buildup?
Sure. Well, in every city, there's a capital, and Oklahoma City
Sure.
is the capital city for Oklahoma.
Hmm.
So most of the federal agencies are headquartered at in the major cities. In Oklahoma, there's basically Oklahoma City and Tulsa, with a number of lesser populated cities spread out. It's a very large state. So being the state capital and the headquarters for most agencies, that's why there's a federal building. That's where all those agencies would be headquartered.
Okay, and is this possibly related to the tribes in Oklahoma, like I know there's some, federal Indian relations, things like that, and a lot in Oklahoma. Is that part of the reason for an extra buildup of federal presence too?
Well, yes, there is it's called Indian land, a lot of reservations and sovereign Indian nations that we work well with. Um, I wouldn't say there was really an unusual buildup of a federal presence in the federal building. If you go to any large city, you'll find a federal building full of federal employees. That's sort of just where they're housed.
Okay, well, I just had mentioned because there was the Murrah Building, and you were saying, okay, you weren't there, you were somewhere else, and then I know I believe there's a federal courthouse as well that was a possible target, but apparently that changed over time, from what I understand in the narrative.
Right. So just to lay it out sort of geographically, the federal building where the credit union and the daily offices for Social Security and those types of offices were located. Behind that was the federal courthouse. That's where all the courtrooms are and all the court staff. And then Oklahoma City's not a huge town, so there was another building that housed some of the ancillary government offices, such as my wife's office, U.S. probation.
Okay. Okay. And the FBI itself was where?
FBI office, we usually occupy the top floors of whatever retail building we're in, and we were at a place called Penn Square Mall. If you think back to the '80s, Penn Square Bank, well, that was one of the big bank failures, the Penn Square Bank failure. So our building actually overlooked Penn Square, what used to be Penn Square Bank. It was several miles away, but our office just did not happen to be there.
Okay. Well, but you were probably close enough that you felt something.
Right. I was deployed. I was still on the SWAT team, and I had an arrest warrant for a fugitive. So I was about 7 linear miles away to the east at Tinker Air Force Base, uh, trying to apprehend a fugitive when the bomb detonated. But I've talked to my counterparts who were in our office. It's a tall tower. They heard it, felt it. This detonation registered 3.2 on the Richter scale, like an earthquake. So there was no missing it.
Now, and maybe you can answer, one of the questions about that, because I interview a lot of people, and there's, a lot of questions. Like one, there's the initial blast, but they happen to be doing geological, research, like where they pick up earthquakes, seismic stuff, or whatever. And there was a second blast, according to feedback I've gotten from a lot of people. Can you address that at all?
Eric, I can address it specifically. So, uh, the magnitude of this investigation was phenomenal. We expended 1,008,000 man hours on this case, and really there was no stone left unturned. So we started hearing some of the conspiracy theories that one bomb couldn't produce this kind of damage, and there were two blasts recorded. Well, one of my responsibilities was to interview the U.S. Geological Survey people, and I had never seen a seismogram or a seismograph, but I went down to Norman to the USGS office, talked to them, got the printout, and I said, "Okay, I see there are two peaks on this graph. Explain to me what that means." And the geologist said, "Yes, rock strata is different between Oklahoma City and Norman, and these tools pick up basically vibrations, and there's a think of it as an echo. So that ground shock, what is called when that explosive force goes through the earth, hit the rock strata and basically bounced off like an echo. So there were two peaks, but they were fully prepared to testify to the geological reason for those two peaks.
Okay, and I don't know, have you seen any of the analysis? I've personally not dug deeply into. I think it's General Parton, who it was the Air Force explosive expert. I believe he's a doctor, PhD. Um, have you seen any of those claims directly? And do you
I,
know
I've
anything?
I've heard of them. The way the investigation was run, I'm familiar with his assertions. Um, we This was roughly a 5,000 pound vehicle borne IED, a large truck bomb. And my recollection is secondhand that he was one of the persons that implied one bomb couldn't do that type of damage. Well, we worked with the British military who had a history with the troubles in Northern Ireland, large vehicle borne IEDs. and they had done testing on a 5,000-pound device, very similar. It was called ANAL instead of ANFO, and we got that data, and I've detonated a lot of very large BBIEDs, and there's no question there was one bomb in front of the building. That's what constituted that damage.
Okay, in a book by Roger Charles, I forgot the name, but it's like Oklahoma City, the investigation, what happened or what couldn't. I can't remember all the title. I apologize offhand. The claim was made, and it may address, and you can say if that would make sense or not, that the building itself, the Murrah Building, was built well, but it wasn't built to the exact same standard as some other federal buildings. And what the basic claim is that there's like an extra hardening that could have taken place that they did not do on that building, which is like approximately $17,000 worth of work. Again, not illegitimate. It wasn't like a shortchanging or shoddy construction. It was just they didn't choose that option. And because of that, that allowed the pancaking to happen on the building with the explosion. Have you heard anything about that, or does that seem feasible with your engineering background?
Well, I was engineering for about a semester and a quarter,
Oh,
so I'm
okay.
certainly no expert. But so that building was built in 1977, and it
Mhm.
was built to the standards for federal facilities in 77. Now the federal building that replaced it, which is diagonally across the street near the west end of the bombing memorial, has those built-in blast resistant features and those things that now are required. 77, these types of events were really not anticipated, which is one reason that truck was allowed to park so close to the structure itself. And if you think of a series of columns with the reinforced concrete floors spanning those columns, that blast pressure basically lifted them up, and then they dropped down under their own weight, and the building just collapsed as a pancake, as you said.
Okay. Okay. Now, I am not an expert in that territory, but I do want to address any and all because I think there are, legitimate questions that have come up. One of the people I interviewed was Jim Casey. He was the special agent in charge in Tampa and I think Detroit at one time. But he was part of the a last minute assignment right before the Timothy McVeigh execution, having to pull together files because there were a lot of files apparently that well, they kind of turned up at that last minute and they had to show them to the defense before the execution. Do you remember any of that? Because it was
Oh, sure.
kind of a, a,
Right.
a big crazy story.
Oh, yeah, Eric, this case, very few things were normal about it because of the magnitude. It's still the largest case of domestic terrorism in the country today. That the FBI and our law enforcement partners are charged with investigating, gathering the information, properly recording it, storing evidence, and such as that. The U.S. Attorney's Office is then responsible for the prosecution. So there was a U.S. Attorney's Office here, but the Department of Justice decided to bring in special prosecutors, which were all great people. And there was, as I recall, kind of a unique discovery order that said, we'll give you everything. Well, usually there are a finite, kind of commonly understood things that are provided during discovery, but uh, is my understanding, there were some things that were not provided in that blanket everything rule. And to make sure we complied, once we realized that that information may not have been provided, everything was then given. And I was still working on the task force. The Oklahoma City is called the Oak Bomb Task Force, but we brought agents in from all over the country, and they were flying in, an envelope with a piece of paper in it, just to make sure that everything was above board and appropriate under that discovery order.
Okay. Fair enough. Now, part of the reason I'm bringing it is there are, I mean, a lot of questions like, and I definitely want to get into them. And since you were local, you might have been more familiar with a different setup. Um, One of the big cases right now, have you heard of Jesse Trentadue, or more specifically, his brother Kenneth Trentadue, who passed away in federal custody.
Right. I remember that.
Okay. One of the things that came out of his death, he had nothing to do with the Oklahoma City bombing. He was completely away, but he did get transferred to Oklahoma under another name when he came across the border. And there were some questions about how he died in prison. Enough questions that Jesse and the family actually did win like $1.5 million. So it's not like there's a smoke but no fire type of thing. Usually, if there's a settlement, I think there may be some degree of truth there. He has spun out of that, looking very diligently, trying to find camera information for all of the buildings, across the way from the Murrah Building. In addition to the Murrah Building, there are some deputies like Deputy Don Browning, who apparently witnessed cameras being removed from the Murrah Building after the explosion, things like that. Do you have any insight on first the camera setup of the Murrah Building and in the area prior to the explosion? And second, any and all footage that may have come out of there?
Well, I don't have any special information. I know from being assigned to the task force, there were at one point I could have recalled the number. I'll say hundreds, and I'm just doing it from memory. But this was 1993 or 1995. Waco was 93. Digital imagery cameras like we think of today just didn't exist. But if
Sure.
there was any footage available, it was reviewed. There was no stone left unturned during the course of this investigation.
Okay, and the reason why I ask it though is that there's, I think, a few minutes of missing footage from like 12 cameras that's being fought over right now. And there's a document from the Secret Service saying that there's two people. And where I'm going with this is the footage that seems to be missing could potentially show a individual known as John Doe number 2. And John Doe number 2 has been described by, I believe, at least 24 witnesses. According to Danny Colson, who I've interviewed, there was, I believe, 24 witnesses, all who said that Timothy McVeigh had a buddy over and over and over and over again. And there was a sketch that went around. Janet Reno talked about it. And then John Doe number 2, poof, kind of vanished in August. Can you talk about that at all? What is your understanding of John Doe number 2 and the saga?
Sure. So the morning of the bombing, we found a confidential vehicle identification number that's stamped into what we call the rear end differential housing, the axle of a truck that exhibited blast damage. Myself and my partner, Jim Norman, wrote down that CVIN. We didn't have cell phones then, so he physically handed his note to a runner, took it to the command post.
So you were the ones who found that? And
Actually, a reserve deputy sheriff found it. He called us over because there were only 2 FBI bomb technicians in the state at the time, myself and Jim. The deputy called us over. He spit on his finger, wiped away the grease. Number was visible. He called it out. Jim and I both wrote it down. We called it out to one another to make sure there were no Scrivener's errors. He gave his note to the runner. It was then used to build the VIN. Turns out it was a Ford Motor product. Ford said they'd built it for Ryder. Ryder said it belonged to Elliott's Body Shop in Junction City, Kansas. So we sent people to Junction City to interview a man named Eldon Elliott at Elliott's Body Shop. And of course, the question was, who rented this truck? And we got the paperwork. It was rented in the name of Robert Kling. And the natural question was, what did he look like? Well, again, 1995, nobody had the digital imagery that we have available now. So we sent a sketch artist up. So Mr. Elliott described Robert Kling, which we didn't know if that was a true name at the time. So he was called John Doe number 1. Sometimes you'll see it as unsub or unknown subject number 1. But he said that man made a reservation, came in and paid cash, but came back later another day to pick up the truck. And Mr. Elder, his recollection was somebody else may have been with him at one of those times. And of course, we want to know, what did that guy look like? So that's where the sketch of John Doe 2 came from. So we published the sketches, John Doe 1, John Doe 2.
Well, which sketch though? Because there was a sketch cap on, there was a sketch cap off. I believe both tied to the body shop.
The initial sketch had that cap with that unique kind of a sideways flame pattern on it. So yeah, that was the initial sketch 1 and 2 of John Doe 1, John Doe 2. So during the course of the investigation, of course, we published those with using the media, which was very helpful, and we began getting over 15,000 leads about John Doe 1, John Doe 2, mostly John Doe 1.
The FBI today released a more detailed sketch of the Oklahoma City bombing suspect known as John Doe number 2. It now shows the suspect wearing a baseball cap. In Oklahoma City, the death toll rose to 87. Rescuers hope to finish their search of the rubble by the end of the week.
A man up in New York said he recognized one as a man he used to work with at a security guard. His name was Timothy McVeigh. So that's one of the leads.
It's Carl something, right?
We're going back a long time, Eric. I don't.
No, I understand. He worked as a security guard with Timothy McVeigh.
Right. Yeah, at Burns Security. And actually, when McVeigh was arrested by Charlie Hanger, the trooper, he had a Burns security badge with him still, which was just pretty good recollection. But at any rate, during the course of the investigation, the FBI, the task force, expended about 8,000 man hours on John Doe 2. And we fully identified him. He was a soldier that had been at the fort, had been at Elliott's body shop. He was interviewed. I've seen his photo. It looks a lot like John Doe number 2. So yeah, John Doe 2.
Private Bunting? Todd Bunting?
Yeah, Todd Bunting, yeah.
Okay. Now, were you doing any of the interviews or just other people doing different things? Because I know you're
No, there were about 1,400 people assigned to this investigation. It was massive. So my part was initially at the crime scene, and then sort of the evidence processing facility. When we realized McVeigh was in jail about 90 miles north of the city, I flew up, seized his vehicle on the side of the road, and then Jim and the other agents, Danny and others, took custody of McVeigh.
Oh, you seized his vehicle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, did you drive it? I mean, what did you do? You put it on a tow truck? What tell me about
No,
that.
so obviously that's a critical piece of evidence. So
Sure.
I stayed with it, and we got a federal search warrant for it, and then brought in a special type of wrecker. It's called a rollback wrecker. So nobody really had to touch it very much. Vehicles have a lot of potential for evidence. So we put it on this special rollback wrecker. I accompanied it to an offsite where our new evidence response team, or ERT, processed it. And inside we found a lot of documentary evidence, Turner Diary type things, some different quotes, that were valuable to show intent for the reason for the bombing. But yeah, that was, seize the vehicle. And then I was still on the SWAT team as well. So after that,
You're kind of all over the place here. I'm just saying that I think of specialization, but you're seizing the vehicle and kind of running here. You're SWAT. You're a bomb guy. Wow.
yeah, this was a strange time, and you have to understand these cases, the magnitude, it's chaotic. So I was on the SWAT team. I was a bomb tech, and I was on the evidence response team. So bomb techs are often assigned to ERT for those post-blast types of investigations. But it was unbelievable, just the amount of things that happened all at once. So once we had seized the car, we were going to use Tinker Air Force Base for McVeigh's initial appearance and arraignment.
As he leaves the Noble County Courthouse in Perry, Oklahoma, a first look at Timothy McVeigh, the first suspect arrested in the deadly bombing in Oklahoma City. And McVeigh was actually in custody ever since Wednesday, arrested for speeding just 90 minutes after the tragic blast, armed with a semi-automatic pistol. and described by officers as casual, friendly, and confident.
You know, he's entitled to an initial appearance, and we're responsible for his safety. So the SWAT team accompanied him to Tinker to make sure he got there safe.
Yeah, I
And
think
Eric,
Danny
I'm sure
Colson was with him at that time.
the team was there. Eric or Danny flew up with us. Uh, I'm sure he was. That, you know, yes, I imagine he was. Uh, but you've seen the video when we're bringing him out of the
Right.
courthouse.
Danny specifically talked about that a little bit and how he wanted it to fly low because it would be a target from overhead.
Right, right.
And they also it locked down Timothy, but Timothy was very cooperative in the sense, very stoic. But I want to get back because this is some great stuff. Okay, you collected the car, and if you're part of the evidence response team, um, you can give me even more information. Did you also do anything at the Dreamland Motel?
Short answer is no. And one of the ways the FBI handles these massive investigations is each division is set up identically. Every ERT has the same training. Every bomb tech has the same training. So when leads would come up outside the Oklahoma City division, they would be assigned to that corresponding unit in whatever division handled it. For instance, up in Decker, Michigan, you know, there was a warrant, and the SWAT team went up there. That was their carbon copy of what we had down here. Just a way to integrate assets so that everybody knows what all the different moving pieces are doing.
Okay, now, can you tell me everything that was done with the car itself?
I wasn't there for that. Once we dropped it off at the offsite, it was turned over to ERT. A friend of mine, Bill Eppright, was the bomb tech assigned to it then to ensure if there was any kind of energetic material or hazardous material in the car. He was there for that. But ERT, our evidence response team, processed it with the assistance of some of the others.
So what I understand you weren't there to physically watch it happen. What would have happened, should have happened SOP wise? Would it be disassembled? Would it be fingerprinted? Blood evident? I mean, how would the car be processed? And
Right.
how
So
was it
there,
processed? You know?
well, as again, I wasn't there, but the general process in the 90s, obviously fingerprints, secure any loose information that was in there. That's where we got a lot of the documentary evidence. Where our intent was to find out who committed this horrific act, right? Um,
But
Anybody that we
also preserved so you could prosecute them, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the goal. That evidence has to be secured, has to be obtained legally, which is why we waited a warrant. There's a reduced expectation of privacy for a vehicle on public streets, but we wanted a warrant to make sure. So then once we had the warrant, that's when we physically seized it, took it to a remote location, and then the team processed it fully. And it stayed off site there in our custody. Really until just before I retired. And then we have an agreement with the National Memorial in Oklahoma City. That car is now on a long-term loan as a
Right.
display in the museum. So a lot of that information was passed on to be displayed since this was such a huge case.
Okay. Now, would the Dreamland Hotel be processed in a similar manner? Fingerprints taken, throughout wherever he might have been. I'm guessing his room, the lobby, potentially, wherever people could have crossed.
Right, absolutely. So the Dreamland Motel, room number 25. Part of this, once we had the sketches of John Doe 1 and John Doe 2, it was, has anyone seen this person, right? Every avenue. So agents and law enforcement partners assigned to that part of Kansas would go out with the printed flyers. Have you seen this guy? And there was a woman at the Dreamland Motel. She said, "Hey, yeah, I recognize John Doe 1. He checked in. Matter of fact, he checked in under the name of Tim McVeigh. I saw him driving an old yellow vehicle." And then later she remembered saying, then he showed up with a Ryder truck. So she was Leah McGowan was her name. She was a critical witness.
Now,
Um,
isn't it odd? While we have that he was very careful. He's Robert Kling when he's renting a vehicle, which to me is more difficult. Like, checking in a hotel and throwing cash at somebody, you can say, "Hey, I'm John Doe, and I'm having an extramarital affair." They're not necessarily as cautious in the 90s, but when you're going to rent a vehicle worth many thousands of dollars, they probably want a little bit better of an ID. So, did it strike you as odd that he would use his real name at the motel and gave a real address that could be tied to him because it was James Nichols' address, if I recall? But yet, when he ordered Chinese food, he went by Robert Kling, and when he rented the vehicle, he went by Robert Kling. I've been asking this of a lot of guests. I'm just trying to get a mindset and an idea of your thoughts.
Right. So rented the truck under Robert Kling with that fake address. Rented the room as Timothy McVeigh. Uh, but that, as you said, he ordered it was Mugu Gai Pan, as I recall. Um, and that was delivered to room number 25 in the name of Kling. Well, Leah McGowan said there was only one person in the room, and we had that name Robert Kling, and we had the name Timothy McVeigh. That's how we began to presume those two names were the same person. So that was in fact a critical link. But why he chose to do that, I couldn't imagine.
I thought there were other people identified that the driver said that it wasn't McVeigh that answered the door, and other people said that there were people in the room and there was discussions who were employees. Am I misinformed on that?
Well, there's a lot of information. A lot of people still think Elvis is alive. There's a lot of things that have been said in the past. I wasn't a part of those interviews up in Kansas, but everything I saw from my position in the task force in Oklahoma City, he was the only person there. When you look back at firsthand accounts, Eldon Elliott, for instance, initially thought um, Todd Bunting and McVeigh were there at the same time and were together. Turns out they were not. He was there at one point, but just not there with him, as associated with him. So these investigations, just like any kind of interview, you're going with the person's best recollection. Some people have lied to me in my 31 years as an
I hope
FBI.
so. No, I'm
Uh,
just saying
it
be
is
odd
a
if they
felony to
didn't.
do that, by the way. But most witnesses, they're doing the best they can to remember, and we record what they say and put it in the file and evaluate it within the totality of the circumstances.
All right, and that kind of and I admit that I'm unprepared in terms of like just being able to name this person, a time, a date, who testified or whatever. Uh, but from what I understand, there were fingerprints taken from the car, and there were fingerprints that were taken from the room, but they weren't actually run. And I believe it was on the Terry Nichols trial that the agent who was in charge of running fingerprints, and I don't recall his name. Do you happen to remember who that
I
was?
I do not know.
Editor, insert picture here. But he had testified that he did not actually run the fingerprints. He was told not to run them, and this is in the trial. Is that odd?
I don't know why that would have happened, but again, I have no knowledge of that. That the events up in Kansas were run by our counterparts in Kansas, and I don't know that. I'd never heard that actually. So this is the first time I'm hearing it 30 some odd years later.
Okay, I mean, fair enough, fair enough. And I want to be as fair as I can. Something else I want to touch on that because you were assigned to the area, I have a is it possible you knew about different operations, or were you guys really siloed? Like, you wouldn't necessarily know of everything that was going on. How did that work in that office? How small was it? How much info did you have? What was going
Well,
on?
so imagine the FBI had the headquarters office for Oklahoma City division, which was the entire state of Oklahoma. Headquarters is in Oklahoma City. So the event happens, the emergency operations procedures start. This is a huge event, so other assets come in. There was a command post established immediately, and then a more permanent command post established a little farther away. And then resources came in because it's called continuing operations. The Oklahoma City office still had to function and perform all of its regular duties. So temporary duty personnel were brought in through what's called the Oak Bomb Task Force, Oak Bomb being the major case name for Oklahoma City bombing. So people would rotate through the task force office, which was almost set up, well, it was set up distinctly and different from the Oklahoma City division office. So as things, the emergency part kind of settled in, and then we were working on the investigative part, that task force office almost functioned as its own little division. And then as time went on, the trials were moved to Denver. So then a subset of that uh, Oklahoma City bombing task force office physically moved to Denver. So it was very segmented just because of the volume of information.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, I want to actually go back a little bit in time, and especially because since you bridge a little bit, you were in Waco, and Waco and Ruby Ridge had already gone down. So before Oklahoma City happened, things were heating up. There was definitely. I think I've spoken to some people. They call it a movement. On the extreme right wing, or I don't even know how to describe it, but they say the movement as kind of a carry-all with the order, with the CSA, with a lot of things. One of the hot spots all the way leading into this and potentially tied to that is a place called Elohim City. Now, are you familiar with Elohim City and what was happening there at the time before the bombing and
Well,
leading up to
so
it?
Elam City is down southeastern Oklahoma. I was familiar with it by name. I arrived here in '88.
Mhm.
Uh, there was a group that predated my arrival called the Covenant Sword and Arm of the Lord. Our SWAT team had raided that, I want to say 85, 86.
Yeah, Danny
Uh,
Colson, on April 19th, 1985, maybe 83. I don't remember, somewhere in there, but literally April 19th,
right.
they were raided and taken down.
Yeah, so that I in talking with some of the older SWAT guys before, yeah, I was brand new in '88, right out of the academy, and I
Mhm.
couldn't even get on the SWAT team. We were on probation for a year back then, so you just kind of had to keep your head down before you could try out for any of the special teams. But I had heard of that raid, and there was a prior plan to use, I want to say it was rockets in a van to attack actually the Murrah Building back in 80, mid 80s sometimes. It
With
did not.
Richard Snell, who
Richard
was
Snell, I
tied.
was involved in
Yeah,
that as I recall. Yeah, these
yeah.
are names from the past, Eric. But
No, no, that's fine. I'll throw in wherever I can. And
yeah,
Richard Snell is significant as well because
right.
he was part of that. He was also, I think, in the sedition trials that took place a little bit after that. But Richard Snell was the guy whose big dream and ambition, along with Kerry Noble and some others, was to blow up the Murrah Building. That was kind of something they wanted to do in the 80s, from what I understand. But it went awry. Somebody got injured when they were playing with explosives, and
Which
so
can
they
happen.
backed off.
Right.
Um, yeah, there's a
Yeah.
reason I thought about doing EOD, but I decided that I did not feel like doing that when I was in the military. But yeah,
My hearing is not as good as it was, but I still have 10 fingers, so I came out okay.
more than okay. Yes, that is a good place to be. Okay, so we've got these other names in there. In Elohim City, by the way, ties to Richard Snell because Robert Millar, who ran Elohim City, who was a pastor or minister or whatever, was his spiritual guide. Snell happened to be executed April 19th, 1995. After
Right.
this attack, he was attended by that. He really wanted to watch the TV, was very interested in what's going on. There was a lot of, I'll just say smoke, but I think there's a legitimate claim that he knew something was going down ahead of time, potentially?
Well, I don't know what he knew. I know April 19th was an incredibly important date to Timothy McVeigh. He was at Waco, as was I, and the fake date of birth he used on that Robert Kling ID, which he manufactured to rent the truck, he used April 19 as his fake birthday. So it was clearly an important date to him.
Not
Um,
only him though. It's called Patriots Day. Lexington and Concord took place
right
on that, and
in
I would
'95,
say
that was,
movement holiday in a weird way. Would that be fair?
oh, I think it has become that in sort of a twisted way for some. 95 April 19th, 95 was the 220th anniversary of Lexington and Concord, and actually, obviously the second anniversary of the fire down in Waco. But yeah, it's an important date to many, I think.
Okay, so where I'm going with this, Elohim City had some other people there, like Carol Howe. Are you familiar with the name Carol Howe? The
You're bringing back some memories back from the
Oh, good.
cobweb. I remember the name. Um, I remember the names because recall in the '80s, I was working white collar, and you had asked about the structure of offices.
Oh, no, no, I understand, but she was doing this in 93, 94. So,
That's my recollection
yeah.
out of, I want to say, the Eastern District up around Tulsa, if I remember correctly.
Yes, she's from Tulsa, had the nickname as the debutante. There's actually a whole series by John Ronson on her called The Debutante. Um,
She had a brother, I think. Uh,
I don't know if
yeah,
she had a brother, but
there was a male involved somewhere. You yeah, these
well, a lover,
okay.
Dennis, Mahon, who, was convicted later for bombing a place in Scottsdale. That might be who you're thinking of.
As I said, we're dusting it off, and those cases were very just not even tangentially related to me. It seems like maybe because I was part of ERT, I may have been part of the warrant. The name Hal rings a bell, and I can't say why because I wasn't on the squad that worked those. When we were talking about the structure of offices, they're broken down into squads of agents. Since my background was accounting, I was on a white collar squad, financial squad. And back then, being on the SWAT team, even as a sniper, was a collateral duty. So you worked your regular cases and then did SWAT stuff in addition. And then when I became a bomb tech in '94, um, that was collateral as well until I had to choose. There was very little room for error as a sniper and as a bomb tech. So I decided to stick with the explosives part, let the SWAT part go. And then as terrorism became more prevalent, I was moved from the white collar squad to the newly formed Joint Terrorism Task Force after 9/11. So, yeah, we had a counterterrorism squad, but it was nothing like what it is now because of the environment. As it became more prevalent, obviously that resource was enhanced.
So, yeah, I'll try to keep it, tighter to it because, yeah, and that's why I always wanna qualify. I don't know where, who,
Right.
whatever, is going on. But Carol Howe, for her story, she was she's an interesting character. She's a kind of a blonde, a debutante, attractive young female who happened to have a giant black swastika tattoo on her arm, which did not, necessarily the crowd you would expect. But she was working as an informant for the ATF, and it appears there were other informants as well, or collaborator. I don't even know who or what. There was an individual called Andreas Strassmeyer who was in Elohim City as well. Some people say he was head of security. Other people say no, he wasn't head of security. He just lived there. But anyway, back and forth. Um, Jesse Trentadue has a FOIA case that got suppressed because CIA said that they couldn't reveal certain information when his name came up. So that sort of implies that he was at least a known figure and tied with something. I don't know what exactly. Do you know offhand, because of, we've got these different agencies and things like that, and with the concern over the movement, the domestic terrorism front, whatever, there was a lot of undercover informants and agents and operations going on. Are you familiar with any of that?
No, Eric, I'm afraid I'm not. That was never my part of it. Um, these names, uh, I've heard them, and I'm certain I was part of some search warrant that involved Miss Howe. It seems like that predated the bombing. I mean, we're going way back. There's been a lot of fires put out since then, so I'm afraid I don't have much information there.
Well, there was a search warrant after the bombing where she was arrested. She was charged. She had, I believe, some weapons and went to trial. She was ultimately exonerated um, for that. But maybe that was it because I don't remember her being searched anywhere prior to that. Or
Yeah, I really, if you think of 31 years, uh, the big cases that pop out are Waco, the Oklahoma City bombing, the
okay,
Olympics, 9/11, an undercover case, and then with regular daily work in between. I remember the name. It was not my case. I'm sure if there was a warrant, there were only maybe 100 agents, 120 agents in the state at the time. So if it's a big case, we all probably worked some little part of it, but I'm afraid I can't fill in any blanks there.
okay. So you were a bomb tech in '94. I'm assuming you were already a sniper before that point. I think you said right.
Right? Yep.
When did you become a sniper?
So I got on the SWAT team in '89, and then about 2 years later, I finished sniper school. I was a sniper at Waco. That was my first major deployment. Of course, that's after Ruby Ridge. Uh, I'd just gotten married. My wife and I were unpacking from our honeymoon when the call for Waco came. So I was there for 51 days.
Yeah, and I want to
And that
go into that. So Ruby Ridge, though, you were not a part of, correct?
No, that was not. No, I wasn't there.
Okay, so you just got married, you got a call, and suddenly you're at Waco. Can you talk about that? Tell me about that. I've interviewed obviously Danny Colson a bit on that. Gary Nessner I've interviewed as well. I'm not sure. Are you familiar with Gary?
She's a negotiator, I believe.
Yes, yes, he was a negotiator there. Um, and so these are different perspectives, obviously. Usually the guy holding the rifle is not the negotiator if you were a sniper at the time, but can you tell me what happened? You got a call. What went down?
Yep. So actually, our home phone rang. We still had hardline phones then, and one of my wife's bridesmaids said, "Are you okay?" So well, we're fine because we just been on our honeymoon. I hadn't seen the news, and she said, "Well, I heard 4 agents got killed." I said, "Well, whose agents?" She goes, "I don't know." So we turned on the TV and saw that coverage, and it was 4 agents from another agency. And my wife and I were talking, unpacking, and if you're on a special team back then, you had a pager. So my pager went off, and it was the SWAT rally number. So my wife said, how does this work?" I said, "No, I'm going to pack for 3 days. Most tactical resolutions are about 3 days, but I'll call you when I get to Waco." Well, we got down there, and the FBI had already assumed tactical command. Um, President Clinton was new. The Attorney General, Janet Reno, was new. And after that firefight with ATF, there was basically a ceasefire to collect dead and wounded. And the president basically said the FBI to go down and assist, bring this to resolution. So that's how the Bureau got involved. Showed up, had a briefing, and assumed it would be over relatively quickly. But obviously, we want negotiations to work, so things were protracted, and it ended up being 51 days long.
Okay, now what was your specific role while you were there? I mean, can you talk about it? I don't know. Whatever's not protected information or what have you.
Sure. No, Eric. So we arrived. I remember had a briefing from one of the ATF. They call them SRT, I believe, Special Response Teams. Their SWAT team. Older guy, senior guy. And I remember that he was wearing black BDUs. I remember his goggles were cracked. There was a tear in his Kevlar. And he said he had taken a shotgun blast from an upper story window, and went on to describe the ferocity of fire they encountered and the types of weapons the Davidians had, including 50 caliber rifles. Well, back then, this is 1993, most departments didn't have armor like Bearcats you see today. So we borrowed Bradley fighting vehicles from Fort Hood, which not for the weapons, just for the armor. And I remember there was a long dirt road that we walked down on the safe side of that armored vehicle. Then if you were to turn left and turn right, you would be in the driveway. We could see the ATF's vehicles they had left, some horse trailers and whatnot. So we set up at that intersection and waited for negotiations to work out. But as time went on,
So you were
we
in the
began,
vehicle or behind it,
no,
or
we had eventually had a sandbag position there.
Mm.
At nights, it got really cold. You wouldn't think Texas would get cold at night, but it did. So there was a heater in the Bradley, so we could sit in the Bradley and try to warm up a little bit. Um, and then as time went on, the decision was made to close the perimeter. It was pretty wide, again, because we're wanting people to come out. And I'm getting information relayed through my team leader, who's getting it through the Tactical Operations Command, who's getting it from the EOC, where the negotiators would have been. But yeah, as time went on, HRT finally came. We were one of the closest teams. We're in a regional response situation, so Oklahoma City went to support Waco. Other area regional teams went in. HRT was really small back then, but they came. And as a sniper, you can only stay on the rifle so long and still do your
Oh,
job
right.
well.
That was the question I had. I was in the military. I didn't serve any combat situations, but there's an old saying that, the war or the military is, like hours and hours of sheer boredom punctuated by, minutes of utter panic, or,
Right.
or
Sure.
whatever. When you're there, just to kind of get a feel for the scene, obviously, I guess you're not just sitting there looking through a scope for 8-hour shifts. What were you guys doing? Were you playing spades, cards, hanging out? No, I'm being serious. What
Yeah.
were you
So
doing?
uh, basically, you have to have forward deployed elements in case there is a surrender if people come out.
Mhm,
At one point, we were told surrender was imminent.
mhm.
To me, imminence, like right now, well, after a pretty long period of time, we finally said, when are they coming out? And we were told, oh, that broke down, hours ago. So yeah, communications is always a problem in any of these large events. But
Mhm.
so there are usually multiple sniper teams on each division. So you would rotate through. And of course, the rest of the team is just, you're waiting for something to happen. I did learn to play spades while I was down there. I'd never learned to play spades
So I
before.
was right. Okay.
Yeah,
There's a
you were
little of
right
that
about
going on.
cards. And as things progressed, HRT was on scene. Um, I and other division snipers were assigned to support the HRT snipers. So I would go via Bradley fighting vehicle around. My position was called Sierra 2, back in the back, and support HRT's snipers, just because they too can't stay on the rifle, all the time. And oddly enough, um, the sniper that took that errant shot in Ruby Ridge was my partner there. And while he wasn't on the phone,
Lon Horiuchi.
yeah, good guy, great guy. He was on the phone, because I believe Randy Weaver's trial was ongoing at the time. So you can see these things run together quite a bit. But I would spend a number of days there behind the compound, and then I would get relieved to be a Bradley fighting vehicle, and somebody else would come in and spell. So to answer your question, it's just a rotating kind of round robin of assets.
And you did this for the full 51 days? No time off? You just kind of sit there and do shifts at night? How
Right.
did that work? Was it 2-hour shifts?
Well, it was a
What you do?
12-hour shift. So our team would be downrange 12 hours. Then we'd have roughly an hour brief before and after. So it made for, long days. We stayed in a hotel there in Waco. Of course, Baylor College is there. I remember, I think it was early one morning, we came in from the shift and the manager said, "Hey, we appreciate what y'all are doing, but we have a basketball team coming in to play Baylor. We need your rooms. You're going to have to get out." So we we got evicted for a basketball team at one point.
Was that getting tiresome though? I'm just thinking, you're away from home, especially you just got married, and 51 days. We just throw that number around, but that's
It's a
a
long
month
time.
and 3 weeks. Uh, that's a long time to be stuck in a place. And could that have been a factor in what ultimately happened? People getting a little bit tired, people getting a little bit sick of the situation, maybe feel like they're getting jerked around. I don't know, but
Oh,
a lot of
well,
people say it didn't go well there.
no, the end came when the decision was made in Washington to insert tear gas. There was always a plan. There's always a plan, and it's not that
Sure.
resources were short. We can bring in other teams, so it wasn't that a team was tired. Other teams came in from Florida. I mean, everybody came through. That there is a plan for these things. That has always been comforting. Um, but this had gone on for a very long period of time. The negotiators were beginning to feel the Davidians were not going to come out regardless. And so, with the approval and at the direction of the Attorney General, tear gas was inserted. And what we know from electronic overhears and thermal imagery and witness interviews of some of the survivors, accelerant had been spread throughout the compound, and 3 fires were set simultaneously. And that morning, it went up so fast. That entire compound was just ablaze. It was difficult to see, and I remember my team was assigned to go down. It was still smoldering. They were still putting out the fires, uh, and those that chose not to come out. I remember one man had what looked to be bandoleros of ammunition strapped across his chest and a gas mask by his right hand. They some of those were not intended to come out. It was the kids that I felt for. Several of them had been either stabbed or shot or beaten. They had no choice, and that's still difficult to reconcile.
Okay, well, and I know there were lessons learned because Gary Nessner, who I mentioned earlier, I interviewed him and he worked a case that happened after that. I don't know if you were involved or not, but it was the Montana Freeman case, I believe.
Yeah,
And
I was not
that
there for that. No.
okay, well, and so they seem to take something to heart because the Montana Freeman standoff took 81 days, not 51, 81. So they tacked on and then they kept going and going and held out and held out and held out. And eventually it was shut down with no casualties. As far as I know, it ended kind of peacefully. So there seemed to be a lesson taken from Waco and applied to the future in that regard. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say Waco. It was unprecedented. Something like that had never happened before. And any event, be the small ones or these huge historic ones, it requires an after action review. What went well, and what I teach my students now is you have to also look at what did not go well, and that's what needs attention. For instance, HRT I believe was doubled in size after Waco. So things when these unprecedented events occur, that is an opportunity to think, once it's happened, it may happen again. So lessons learned are critical.
All right. Well, another lesson that came up, and Danny Colson had mentioned, and I had heard it from someone else too, that David Koresh himself um, liked ice cream a lot and actually would go out jogging almost every day. And the question came up of, why didn't somebody just pick him up with a squad car? while he was out jogging. Is that something you've looked into or studied when you said, lessons learned?
Well, it's difficult, and I would never
I just-
armchair quarterback, decisions
But
made
that's my
prior.
job. I'm on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, if I would just say in a purely hypothetical and unrelated situation, if the subject was available outside their fortress, it may make sense to make an arrest outside. But again, I'm unfamiliar with the situation beforehand. Um, yeah, I hate to armchair quarterback what another agency did or didn't do.
Oh, fair enough. There is another question I had because, I brought up the date, April 19th, and that was Waco as well, which some people could say that kind of led into Oklahoma City. I mean, you tie that date, I mean, these things,
Sure.
it's almost like a religious thing in some regards. Do you know why on that date they said, okay, we're just out of patience? Was it a coincidence that it was April 19th, or was it potentially deliberate? I'm asking if the date was a factor at all
Well,
in
I
why it went
wasn't in
down.
the command structure, but I'm convinced that date had nothing to do with it other than the longevity of the investigation, what the negotiators knew or thought they knew, what the tactical command thought would be the better resolution. And Washington was directly involved in this, um, and the president was briefed. So no, I don't think that date had any calculus at all.
Okay, and another question that came up is who actually made the judgment calls? Was it the FBI, as far as you know, or was it the Department of Justice?
Well, again, I wasn't in command, but my understanding was information that we would feed from on scene would go to the Emergency Operations Center, what we call the EOC now, and critical information was passed to DOJ. Department of Justice was intimately involved in those decisions, is my understanding.
Okay. Now I'm going to pivot completely out of here, and I'm going to talk about something else that kind of runs possibly parallel to all this. It's an operation in the FBI called PATCON, PATCON, short for Patriot Conspiracy. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I haven't heard of that.
All right, well, very short topic for the moment. Uh, fair enough. Well, let me see. I know I've held you for a while. I tend to ask a particular question at the end, and I'd love to leave it open. I'd love to have you come back potentially, maybe even live if possible, so a lot of people can ask questions. And I'd like to get into the Olympic bombing and Eric Rudolph. And I think, what happened to Richard Jewell kind of bothers me a little bit that the guy who discovered the bomb was sort of he wasn't prosecuted technically. He wasn't charged, but his name was thrown about a lot, and he died at, I think 47, and his life was not great after all of that. But leaving that for right now, just on what I've covered and asked about, what is the one question that I should have asked you, but I never actually did?
Eric, I'm afraid I wasn't able to shed a lot of light on some of these things. They were tangential to me at the time. Um, I think you covered that period of my career, which was sort of the early period, really well.
Okay, all right. Well, Barry, again, your book, Hazardous Devices, and Memoir of an FBI Bomb Technician, Accountant, and Sniper. The subtitles I never quite remember. I just remember the overall name. I've had a subtitle once that was literally a paragraph, and I'm going, da, 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 da. Anyway, which I understand. Subtitles for a book is kind of like SEO, for finding websites, early old school, if you will. But I will have a link in the description so people can always get that. And if you order it through Amazon, I get a little bit of a commission.
Oh, great.
It's no cost to anybody. You won't be charged anything else. It's just I like to be open about this called an affiliate link. And folks can check that out. And Barry, thank you so much for coming by.
It's my pleasure, Eric. It's great to talk with you.